Well, hey, man.
Top 3 bands from the 60s, go. Not individual artists, just bands.
Okay, Beatles, the Grateful Dead, and then Zeppelin.
In that order.
Yeah, I think I like the Grateful Dead more than the Beatles, but I think the Beatles are more iconic than the Grateful Dead.
Cool. So not necessarily your favorite, but like in terms of greatness, the Beatles eclipse.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
Respect that.
No.
I don't think that... to me, the Stones are like a one-trick pony. It's just like British blues, which great music, but like...
To a degree.
Not like the Beach Boys, man. Inventive, good vibrations, pet sounds, right?
I mean, Brian Wilson was... he was the man.
Yeah,
I totally get it.
So I would keep the Beatles. I would swap out the Stones for the Beach Boys, and I would probably replace the Dead with like the Doors for me. More like Well, I mean, the Dead are psychedelic too, but I think the Doors are like super. Jim Morrison, the Electric Poet.
One trick pony.
All right, now I got to ask the guest. Top 3. I'll open it up. Artists. We'll do not just bands, but top 3 60s bands / artists.
I'm glad, because it's not that I'm not into rock and roll and so forth, but I mean, the 60s for me was more about Motown, the Supremes, Sam Cooke, Otis Redding.
Yeah.
I mean, let's there's some famous folks in there.
Sitting on the dock by the bay.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. All right, let's just jump right in then. Folks, welcome back to the Hometown Holler.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
It's been a little while. Today our guest is Karen Brinson Bell, former executive director of the North Carolina State Board of Elections. That is a long one.
That's a mouthful.
That is like second only to, I think, of the guests we've had. That is like the second longest formal title. I think the first would be like when Mo Green was here. He was
running.
He was the Democratic nominee for the North Carolina State Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Yeah, that's taking 2 lines.
Yeah,
to
that's
fill
like one of them German words with all the consonants. And anyway, so Karen's here today. She from 2019 through 2025, she oversaw every election in North Carolina, and somehow, presumably, kept your sanity, but certainly kept your sense of style. You've got like an awesome Schoolhouse Rock T-shirt for folks who are listening and not watching on YouTube. Which, by the way, if you're listening, you can watch us on YouTube. You can get the full Hometown Holler experience, in 4K. So very important. We'll talk about how elections really work in North Carolina. I think it's something that everybody thinks they're an expert on. They know like how the system works, but in reality, very few of us actually do. And I think you are in a unique position to enlighten us, since you were, the buck stopped with you for the better part of 6 years. And every year we have an election. So every year for 6 years, you were running things. And so we'll talk
through tumultuous waters too, right? Like, we had COVID, we had Helene, we had the Griffin saga.
Yeah, recently, yeah.
So, you definitely experienced a ton of stuff.
Yes. I started out with the new election for CD9, Congressional District 9.
Right. Oh my gosh, that was was that Dan Bishop?
That was. And at the
Wow.
same time, there was a vacancy. A congressman had passed away in eastern North Carolina, and so we had a congressional vacancy election at the same time while Hurricane Dorian was coming in. And all of that was happening in September, when I had just been named state director in June.
Wow.
So good thing that I had been in the field a bit.
Not slept more than 2 hours a night in the past 6 years. Like,
Not
that
much.
just seems, that's incredible. So we'll talk about how things work, the battles behind the scenes of our state democracy, and also let's maybe talk about at some point what's in store for voters in North Carolina, where we see things in the future. To kind of kick things off, Quinn, I see you chopping at the bit.
Get into it, because this seems like a very niche position. And do you just stumble into this, or were you in 4th grade saying, this is what I want to be?
I don't think anyone's ever in 4th grade saying they're going to work in elections, or if they do, they think it more of a political position and being a politician, but that's not what this is. But I do say that I was born into it in some ways. My father was mayor of my tiny town that I grew up in, Kenansville in Duplin County. He went on to be town manager and county economic development director. So
all the
civic
aspects
duty,
of government.
Yep. He was a precinct official. He even after retirement, became a town commissioner again. So, giving back to your community, being of service. Had a cousin that was on school board, and another that was director of emergency services, and one that went on to be the county manager. So, it's sort of in our blood, I guess.
Sure. So when did you start?
So I actually started in 2006, February 2006 was my first job in elections, I was a field person for the State Board of Elections called a district election technician. I was living in the Asheville area at the time. I had been a real estate trainer and recruiter, and they were looking for trainers with the rollout of new voting equipment. So that tells you this was in response to the 2000 election and all the hanging chads.
Yeah.
So
Which would be a great band name, by the way, the Hanging Chads.
there you go. We'll start that up in our spare time. So did that, and it really was a jack of all trades position before it was all over with. So rolled out new voting equipment, got people trained on that. Had some wonderful experiences of a voter who had never been able to roll his wheelchair up to a piece of voting equipment. That was part of the changes of the Help America Vote Act, was to make voting accessible.
Right.
And just in a demo machine, this man cried because he could actually vote for himself. Now, his wife had choice words for that, but that's a whole other story. I was a field person. I stepped in when a director's husband had a heart attack out of state the night before the election. I stepped in when another went into labor unexpectedly. So did that for 5 years, then became the elections director for Transylvania County, the coolest county name. No offense to the other 99.
It's a pretty sick county.
Yeah, especially when I say it nationally.
Yeah.
Nationally it gets attention. So, was there for 4 years and then did some election consulting work around how to administer ranked choice voting elections, because North Carolina was the first state, not Maine, the first state to have a statewide election with ranked choice voting since the early 1900s.
Check that factoid.
I was part of that. I was part of some municipal pilots for it. And so, it wasn't whether a jurisdiction should or shouldn't do it. It was how did we do it in North Carolina when that's what the law said we should do. And then from there I got approached and asked to be the state director, which also has a whole nother title. I was chief election official according to the National Voter Registration Act. We can go into a whole quiz on acronyms if you want to.
But in other states, that is the Secretary of State?
That's right. In most states and territories, the elections fall under the Secretary of State, and they're considered the chief election official. But in North Carolina and 9 other states and territory, it's not the Secretary of State that has those responsibilities. And so in our case, executive director is designated as the chief election official.
Does that mean in North Carolina, your job is the person that Trump calls to find those votes or whatever? Because in Georgia, that was the Secretary of State. Was that because he was the chief election official, so he's the go-to guy when you're trying to be sneaky?
Well, I will say the call would have probably first gone to Elaine Marshall because they make that mistake all the time.
Okay, most people don't realize.
But it would have eventually landed at my phone.
Word, yes. And you would have been straight to voicemail.
No, you would have answered it.
I actually interacted a lot over the years with Secretary Raffensperger, and I would have been very much the same. We've conducted this election, we've counted the votes, we've audited, and they aren't to be found.
So I guess that kind of leads into the other question, where what's the biggest myth about elections that you would tell somebody? Because we've seen, at least in our lifetimes with voting, that elections are not secure, they're terrible, they're rigged. Presidents calling up folks to find the votes. So what is the biggest myth about the NC elections being rigged?
It's interesting if you, over time, things perpetuate themselves and the myths change. Having worked in elections in the mountains, it was about ballot boxes being sent down the river. We could go back into some really old stories about Madison County and rigged elections up there. But that was back, also when there would be ballot stuffing and there would be moonshine exchanged for votes. And I've heard that described, days of old. Yeah. Probably older than the 60s and the rock bands.
Conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Than the lame stuff we have to deal with today, like moonshine and rivers.
Yeah, but it's why, actually the folks in the mountains really value the fact that we have a paper trail, and we have in North Carolina since 2006. for every ballot that's cast, there is a paper record of it. And so if we ever have to hand count or recount, we have a paper record to do that. So, a lot of the myths center around people just really not understanding. I mean, there's been times when I've been asked, oh, you don't count the absentee ballots, the ones submitted by mail, until you see if it's a close contest or not. No, every ballot that is submitted, by the time the polls close, gets counted. And then there's provisional ballots that we have to consider. There's always conspiracy theories around the internet and whether that's influenced an election or not. Well, North Carolina law, and it has for a long time now, said that we can't connect our devices to the internet. So our voting equipment is never connected to the internet. There's actually procedures in place to air gap it. I mean, we can get really geeky here, but I think it's just helping people to understand all the nuances. This is a very complex system. And North Carolina is among the 10 largest states or 9 largest states in voter registration. In my tenure, we had the highest turnout twice, the 2 highest turnouts in North Carolina history. So that also tells me that people don't, they don't have misbeliefs about how our system works.
That's a good point.
You don't use a system.
They wouldn't show up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't use any system. If you don't believe that a car is going to run, you're not going to buy that car.
Yeah, good point.
So if you don't believe that our elections are conducted fairly and securely, you're not going to go and spend the time casting your ballot. And then we also, we've had the largest voter registration during my tenure. So there's really, there's just a lot to consider. And I think that's where we've really worked over the time that I was executive director. We worked very hard to tell our story, encourage people to be poll workers. Yeah. Because that is really where you learn how the rubber meets the road. Yeah. And to try to help people understand that it's their neighbors, former basketball coach, school teacher, the nurse when they were growing up that gave them their shots. Those are the people that are working most of our polls, or people right there from your community that you know. And if you can't trust them, who do you trust?
And the people working the polls, isn't it supposed to be 50-50 on the parties, right? 50% of the poll workers are Republican, 50% are Democrat.
Well, we can have unaffiliated as well, which is becoming more and more necessary in North Carolina, because that's the largest affiliation is unaffiliated. Sure. But yes, there is a division where it's bipartisan representation or multi-partisan representation at our polling places.
So it's not like just one polling place is full of Democrats stuffing ballots or full of Republicans eliminating votes. That's not the case.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think anybody who has qualms about any part of our election system should just do a shift as a poll greeter or a poll watcher. It's like, it's very demystifying. It's fun. You make.
It's a blast.
I made a lot of new friends that way. That's how I met Deputy Jim. It is fun. I got a bottle of wine out of it.
I mean, I like working the polls elsewhere, but 12 hours working that.
It's paid.
I
got paid.
It's minimal
something.
pay, but it's pay.
I appreciate people doing it. I'm not trying to talk you out of doing it.
Come on,
do
Quinn.
it. Do it. Fucking do it. I get it.
Yeah.
But
it's
to say it's fun.
Every time I've done it, I've made a new friend.
And I should point out, of all these state election directors we've ever had, I'm the only one that's ever been a chief judge at a polling place too.
Oh wow!
So in between being a county director and becoming state director, I actually was in charge of an election day polling site in Buncombe County, North Carolina.
That almost feels like a job requirement. But that's remarkable that you're. I want to jump real quick to the Griffin case, because we talked a lot about that on this show. We had Justice Riggs on. We had lots of DMs and email. I mean, just like people had, gosh, I mean, if they had so many questions. And I really struggled to answer those questions because that case was like legal ping pong. I could not keep track of where it was on a given day. It was really hard for me to understand the arguments being used by the plaintiff, by Jefferson Griffin. Like, you were in the center of all that.
Absolutely.
Can you...
without a law degree.
Right. God bless you. Is there any... I mean, this is going to be ambitious, but can you walk us through your experience in the Griffin case?
Yeah. I mean, the Griffin case was being watched not just by North Carolinians, but across the country. And it was legal ping pong. I think that's a really good description because it involved state courts, it involved federal courts, and then the federal courts say send it back to state, and then there would be need to file in the federal court, and so it's all over the place. But I think just to kind of give the background on it, so I've already mentioned just the jargon of it. We have the Help America Vote Act, which pertained largely to voting equipment, but there were other aspects to make sure that we could help America vote. And then there's the National Voter Registration Act, and so the NVRA. And so with all of those, there's the ability for citizens to monitor the process. And with HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, they can file a complaint. So in the fall of 2023, we actually had a HAVA complaint, similar to the case that became the Griffin Riggs case. And it was questioning whether we had the correct voter registration form requirements and whether or not that information the driver's license and social security numbers had properly been collected. So we heard that case, but what the plaintiff didn't know, or the complainant, was that we were already in the process of updating our voter registration form. When I came on board, one of the big things I wanted to do was to make everything as user-friendly as possible.
Makes
we revamped our website. We revamped a lot of our forms, and keep in mind that we went through a lot of changes about absentee by mail during my tenure, various things in voter ID implementation and so forth. So the voter registration form was in the queue. And one of the things we wanted to do was to make it where it was a user-friendly form. And so we rolled that out. A lot of people think it was due to that complaint, but we rolled that out. It coincidentally was with that complaint, but that came online January 2024. So with that, it made it very clear to the voters that you do have to provide your driver's license or the last four of your social. Our instructions before, the form that had been developed by my predecessor during her tenure, it gave that instruction, but the coloring of the fields didn't lead you to believe that it was a requirement. So we corrected that. And we also found that there was no violation beyond this that needed to be addressed. And so we moved forward, and the board considered whether or not we should do any updating to our records, but determined that voters had already established their eligibility. Now, we're getting really wonky here, but
Sure.
but within HAVA, Help America Vote Act, if someone's driver's license or social does not validate, so when someone registers to vote, most people do that at the driver's license office, and so it processes on through. But every once in a while, that's not the case, or it might be, and something doesn't validate. Now, what does not validating mean? That could very well be, let's think of the number of people in our state whose name's Mary Beth or Billy Joe or something of that nature. And on certain forms, they may put Mary Beth in the first name field and have a whole nother middle name, or they might put Mary in first name and Beth in the middle. And so now you've got databases that aren't the same. And so that doesn't validate because it didn't match.
For perfectly understandable reason.
The same thing happens with punctuation. So hyphenations or an accent mark or something like that. But, hyphenations are very common. And so like the Social Security Administration has character links. So truncation happens. And so now you don't have a match once again. So it's a variety of things. But Help America Vote Act said if someone didn't validate, but the Postal Service was able to deliver their mail, then they received a notification that said, when you come to vote, you're going to be asked to present HAVA ID, different than voter ID. HAVA ID could be a bank statement. It could be a pay stub.
Proof
it could
of residence kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And so at that point, they get to go through the system. And that's where these people were being questioned in that HAVA complaint. And then that's what rolled into the Griffin campaign seemed to pick up on that complaint and roll that into their lawsuit. And so the lawsuit challenged how we got to a place where on election night, Griffin was winning by around 10,000 votes. Riggs ultimately wins, and that's because between election day and what we call canvass day. There's a canvass period, a certification period, where we validate, we do an audit, a post-election audit to make sure the machines were tabulating correctly. We do a whole other series of different audits, reconciling the poll book, how many people checked in to how many ballots were cast in the machine, and making sure that those match.
Making sure the election is secure
exactly.
and fair.
And also dealing with provisional ballots. And so in a presidential year, you have a ton of provisional ballots. And I think we were over 60,000 in 2024. Don't hold me to that. Mm-hmm. That's my recollection. And that's because of a number of things. So presidential year, people don't turn out to vote until presidential years.
Right.
And so then they show up at the wrong polling place. And so they may be given a provisional ballot instead of transferred over to their correct polling place. People think that they registered to vote at DMV, but we don't have them on the poll book. It could be just a typo, but we got to get that reconciled and do that researched. But it also, in 2024, voter ID was launched. And so if you did not have a proper form of ID, you voted provisionally. So we had a lot of provisional ballots to consider, and a lot that could be counted. And so that's how we got down to...
Could be counted or should be counted?
That's for the county board to determine. Did they meet the criteria to be counted? And so that's part of that canvas period is for the staff to research what was the circumstance.
On a local level.
And then with the state board's help and the DMV, because we have to search those databases.
Yeah, I think it's important to remind folks that this is not all happening in Raleigh
right.
necessarily.
There are no ballots at the State Board of Elections. Let me just point that out. That was a big concern in 2020 was what was I doing with the ballots? That's what a protester had on their sign.
So were you just getting called all the time? Were they just like, Karen? Was your phone just nonstop about this?
Yes, there was. There was a lot of that, and emails and various, and national reporters wanting to know where we stood. And when you're in a court case, a lawsuit, you can't say but so much.
How often did you get cussed out?
I will say, I had a buffer. I feel for the person, those folks who answer the main line at the state board. Not to sidetrack us too much, but the time that someone called in and said someone might be murdered or could be murdered.
Yeah,
that was a temporary worker that got that call, not me. Give it to me. Right. If you're upset with me, give it to me. And I got the emails that said that. So,
sure.
That's the kind of.
I can only imagine because X and all the other social media stuff was just going ham about this. And again, you're in the center of it. You're in the ping pong of it, and you're the one that made this happen.
Yeah, but you know what? It's why I tried so hard to hold press conferences, to do as many interviews as I possibly could, to do town halls and things that were made available to us. Because when you get to tell the story, when you get to tell the nuts and bolts, as long as this conversation has been about just one court case, it does help people understand. And, I think you begin to realize if it's me or if it's that county director, if I can sit here and talk to y'all this at length about something like this, we must know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Why do you think Jefferson Griffin and the North Carolina Republicans waited until now to challenge this law, this HAVA law that's been on the books since 2002?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that stem from it. I mean, one, we have reached a day and age that it isn't just Judge Griffin, it's many candidates in other states even who have they won't accept a loss and they won't concede defeat. Even when, and in this case, you've gone through the recount process, you've watched the audits take place, how there were other contests on that ballot, and you were accepting that those folks were the winners. Right. But why would this one contest not be conducted correctly, or why would that, be drawn into question and these other contests not be? And so, it's really, in North Carolina, we are so purple. And in so many close races. I mean, let's not forget that I oversaw the state Supreme Court race, which was
Beasley,
401 votes.
That's right.
Difference. So close races are a thing in North Carolina. And I think, we also make more data available publicly than any other state.
Well, that's cool.
And so citizen auditors can do their job. And that's how the Help America Vote complaint got filed that I was talking about, that led up to the case. The problem with
the irony of that.
Yeah.
That just like the State Board of Elections was so transparent that it gave, I would describe certain people as bad faith actors, the ammo they needed to throw sand into gears or
because people are stupid.
Yeah, no, that's just really interesting.
Well,
That was mean, but
we are very transparent, and but that's okay, because you know what? I know that citizen auditor also questioned some of the tactics of the Griffin lawsuit and wouldn't be a part of some of that. So, it's interesting how these things come to be. I think that the difficulty in that was that, and the courts did, weigh in on this, and Justice Dietz in his dissent was particular to point out that the rules of the game had been established. The game had been played. There's the Purcell principle, which usually is, it's from a federal level, but states apply it as well. And here, again,
and he's a Republican.
Dietz is a Republican.
He
right?
is. He is. And so, ultimately, I think that's where things came down. And then when the federal judge, who was a Trump appointee, stepped in and said, this is done. And so the only thing that was left in fallout was a portion from an order from the Court of Appeals, the State Court of Appeals, to address those voter registrations with the driver's license and social. And so the State Board since then has acted on that.
Switching gears, one of the reasons I was really, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show was because your departure from the State Board of Elections was shocking to me, how that went down. And I think it would be shocking, or at the very least very interesting, to lots of people who may not have heard about it. Could we talk about, I mean, there's a reason that I introduced you as former executive director.
That's right.
Why former executive director?
So what should have been page 2 news turned into much more. So the State Board, and this, maybe we should talk about a little bit of structure of how this all comes to be. So the State Board of Elections is a 5-member board that up until recently was appointed by the governor in its 100+ years of existence. And back in the late 60s, I think it was, they created the position of the executive director. And so the State Board appointed by the governor, bipartisan board, but it is majority of the governor's party, then meets and votes on the executive director. And for a long time, the executive director served 4-year terms with no term limit. It changed after 2018 to where it was 2-year terms. And so every odd year, the executive director is up for reappointment or appointment before the State Board. State Board's not full-time. They're more quasi-judicial in their role. And what they're doing is choosing the full-time, chief executive to administer elections in North Carolina, oversee the agency, oversee the staff, and oversee all 100 county boards of elections.
So those board members, I guess, maybe set guidance and kind of supervise, but you're, or the person in your job, the executive director, is in charge of the getting it done.
That's
the
right.
Execution.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so it was due for reappointment. But in December of 2024, in what's considered lame duck session, the legislature inserted into the Helene Relief Bill a section it changed up a lot of the appointment authority of the governor, but this was one of them. This was actually the 6th attempt in 9 years to change the appointment authority of the governor for the State Board of Elections.
Right. Folks may remember, I don't remember the exact number of the bill because who does?
Right.
But yeah, it was billed as hurricane relief aid, but many, if not the majority of the provisions of that bill had very little to do with hurricane relief and had a lot to do with restructuring our state government. And as you mentioned, one of the provisions was taking the power away, the power to appoint members of the state board of elections away from the governor, and it went to the auditor.
The auditor.
Yeah.
North Carolina is the only state where the auditor has any part with elections.
Which incidentally was a seat that had just flipped partisan, from being a democratically held seat to a Republican.
Correct.
Held, so
When that bill passed, were you just sitting at home and did you just look at your husband and just like, shit, there it is. I'm out. This is what's going to happen. I know they're about to just F me.
Well, again, this was attempt number 6 in 9 years. I came into the role knowing that this was contentious. But I just didn't know whether this would be the one that would be the done deal.
Right.
So, it was my job to go about the work that I had to do.
Sure.
And it was up to the governor whether he wanted to challenge that. And he did. And actually, the 3-judge panel at the Superior Court level agreed that the governor had the authority. But then it went to, and this when I say all this, like, this is playing out over January, February, March, April.
While the Griffin case is
going on.
You had a hell of a year.
And I focused on that.
Yeah.
That's the work we had to do.
That was your job.
And also, we had not done our lessons learned from the election and what we needed to learn from the Helene situation.
Wow.
So there's a construction of 8 districts. The counties are divided up into 8 districts. And so I was going to district meetings, bringing people who had lived through Helene and sharing their lessons learned and so forth. That's where my focus was. And it always has been and always will be how to deliver the best elections possible and ensure every eligible voter's vote could count. And so, what was going on in the courts, with the makeup of the board and my appointment, it just needed to play its way out.
Sure.
It did. And I think it was on April 30th that the Court of Appeals said that the 3-judge panel was not correct in their minds, and the state Supreme Court did not take it up. They let it go into effect, which meant May 1, the auditor made the appointments. So April 30th, decisions made in the courts. May 1, the auditor made the appointments.
So quick too. I mean, they just made that stuff happen.
Well, and so now it's the majority is of the auditor's party, and they were sworn in on May 7th, and that's when they took their vote. And we can go into all the details of that too.
Yeah, well, and that's where I was hoping to go next, because I mean, as a self-proclaimed North Carolina civics nerd, I watch as much of the proceedings as I can and read the stories in the news as they come out, and this whole thing on the surface kind of boring. House and Senate pass a bill, it gets challenged, it goes to the court makes its decision, and the wheels on the bus go round and round. But it had, in terms of how it played out in real life, it had the appearance of a hostile takeover.
Oh,
100%. For me, it felt weird.
Well, and I remember the next day watching the video of the stuff happening, and it felt that way as well. And especially with somebody with your resume with it. You've been in it 2 decades. You've led North Carolina through, as you mentioned earlier, 2 of the largest elections ever in North Carolina history, through COVID, dealing with this Griffin saga, through Helene. You have shown that you can handle shit. And then all of a sudden, the way after April 30th to May 1st, it just looked like it was ready to go in the chamber for them. Just boom. And everything just started changing directions. And it seemed very dirty and not clean, in my opinion, from the outside looking in.
Well, a question I have kind of on this topic is so I recall that you did not have an opportunity, correct me if I'm wrong, you did not have an opportunity to give departing remarks. Is that or no? Or
right.
no?
Yeah, that's right. So the board met. They were sworn in. We had some updates to give, so I gave those reports and so forth. But it was mostly a ceremonial. And so as the meeting was coming to an end, I asked to be able to give some remarks, because I knew, at this point I was not reappointed, and that was made clear to me, even beforehand. Sure. So what I wanted was an opportunity to thank the voters for their confidence in me, thank the hardworking county staff, state board staff who had helped us gain national recognition. It's an award-winning agency at this point, and just to give recognition where recognition was due, and for all that we had made it through.
Right.
And so I tried to ask the new chair, to allow me to speak. He said that there was already a motion on the floor to adjourn, and it got a second, and so I was left without being able to speak. And so, it's like, in the moment, I just said, well, I was prepared to give remarks, and if anyone in the room would like to hear those remarks, I will give them now. And the Republican board members, those 3 individuals, they left the room. The Democrat members stayed, and most of those present stayed, as well as the reporters. And so that's why there's video clips of it. I think, it's like I said, it should have been a page 2 story that there was even a changeover that day, because really Judge Griffin, he conceded at 10 a.m. when the board meeting was supposed to start, but the judge who was going to swear in the board members was running late, so we didn't start at the same time. So there was just a lot going on.
Sure.
So I stayed and I gave my remarks, and I didn't realize that it would be such a thing. I just knew that's what I needed to do.
I guess I just want to know how it felt, knowing that I'm not trying to ask you to get in the heads of the 3 Republican board members that got up and disrespected you by just leaving. Because, I mean, you're in a nonpartisan position. It's not like you're Democrat or Republican. But it kind of felt to me, just speculating, is like these people are pissed at you because of this Griffin situation, and they have zero respect now because you didn't do what they wanted you to do. Now that they're in control, and so they're getting you out of the way. Is that how you felt?
I don't know what was exactly going on in their minds. I did say that it was disrespectful. And, at one point it was said to me that my predecessor wasn't given that opportunity. And I said, well, my predecessor wasn't even there the day that the vote was taken to not reappoint her. So and I'm not,
Sure.
throwing shade or anything
but it's an apples to oranges situation.
Yeah, and I was there that day. I was prepared for what was to come. I was going to greet the board. But, let's also just keep in mind, there's a 5th state elections director in the whole time of the State Board of Elections. The first one was over 20 years. The second one served for 20 even years. Then my predecessor was 6, and then I was 6. So, there's no precedence to go off of. I just really, it was a hard day because truly, do I have a party affiliation? Yes. What does that matter? When I go to cast my own ballot, what ballot I'm handed, just like you or any other voter in North Carolina, that's what that determines. And you don't even know. That doesn't mean I vote straight party.
Right.
So, what I wanted was the opportunity to explain that this is a profession. It is a profession that becomes a passion, and that, all the steps that were taken in my tenure, be it to protect people from COVID, be it to ensure that, even in the most isolated communities of Yancey County, that their ballot got to them through Helene, that we extended voting during, Hurricane Dorian so that we could get people, their chance to early vote. Those were all actions taken to ensure that every eligible voter could cast their ballot.
And things you took seriously.
Absolutely. And for it to ever have been cast as a partisan was always very hard for me because, let's go back. I was a county elections director in Transylvania County, and it was one of the first counties to ever be more unaffiliated than Democrats or Republicans. But it still was Republican leaning.
Right.
And I was at a time when at one point it was majority Democrat, and at one point the board was majority Republican. And you didn't know, like my work never changed. My relationship with those boards never changed. And, one of those Republican board members from the county passed away during my time as state director. And I still have a voicemail from him where he says he loves me.
No.
That's the kind of relationships. That's the commitment, because that's in this profession. It is not partisan. It is not political. Those decisions, even, 2020, we got so chastised for a settlement agreement that the state board unanimously agreed to, and then gave me the authority to sign the settlement agreement. That happens all the time. You don't want to deal with 5 people across the state and getting their signature when you can delegate settlement authority, as long as I carry out what they were to do. The same thing will happen with this executive director, and the same thing happened with my predecessors.
This executive director, I mean, he has no experience, and he was the lawyer for the majority party right now, Republican House Caucus. So I don't know.
This is Sam Hayes.
Sam Hayes, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
How does that feel, having somebody who has zero experience come in there?
I have expressed concern about that, and in part because my predecessor was put in by the board that was appointed by Governor McCrory. Mm-hmm. So that was considered a change for partisan reason.
Sure.
But she had worked at the state board. We had worked together. During my tenure, we were in communication with each other at times. So, that thread of elections experience was there across those 2 tenures. And when I handed off, it's been tough. And I really stressed the need to rely upon the civil servants, those public servants working in the state board with 20, 30 years of experience, many of them, but some not as long. But most of the state board actually has county elections experience now. That wasn't the case when I came in. And so, if you're not going to have that experience, at least lean on the experience and recognize, what you have and the incredible talent that's out there in the counties as well. It's unfortunate, that the decision was made. I had worked with Sam in the legislature. I knew him as a candidate. So I guess he brings that experience to the table, but I'm sure candidate filing will be great. And even though we made a lot of improvements there, it just... And I thought we had a good working relationship, but apparently, he thinks he's in there to clean things up, is what I understand. And we had national recognition. There's not work to clean up.
Yeah, so I think kind of zooming out, right, as you mentioned, during your time as executive director, there were lots of challenges, lots of progress overcoming those challenges. I mean, you guys revamped the website for one, which is that's a pretty tremendous feat. It's as somebody who's used that website many times for many reasons, looking at data, trying to find my polling place, just sending it to a friend who's never voted before and saying this is what you need to do. That's one thing that made my voting experience tangibly better, but also helping folks, like you mentioned, in faraway Yancey County, when they were slammed by Helene, making sure their voices were heard. So I think folks look at the administration that you brought to the institution, and then we see it between the Griffin case and between the restructuring. Mm-hmm. And there's even talk now of, I think there was a bill, I don't remember the number, that talked about letting politicians pick the staff of the agency. Yeah,
that's in the mini budget.
In the mini budget,
and also the omnibus bill. There's an
right. So now, so that now we would have the people who work in our state board of elections decided on the basis of their partisan affiliation. What do you think this says about the state of our democracy in North Carolina? All of these things in aggregate.
Yeah. Let me insert this. Even this conversation today, we have highlighted that y'all were on the outside looking in and didn't understand the complexities. And so now some of these efforts, the fact that they've appointed someone without elections administration experience or even a lot of public administration experience, there aren't as many board members who have been county board members. Various things of this nature kind of illustrates that it's one thing to be on the outside looking in, and then once you're in there, you realize the complexities and the intricacies of this. And so, that's what's sort of I think if we all keep that perspective and not act so quickly on some of these changes that are being proposed, that's what's troubling, is not understanding the processes, not understanding, that there's state law and federal law to administer. And so now when you start talking about positions, so the mini budget gives 7 positions that will be appointed by the executive director. They had to amend another chapter of state law that has only allowed for this to be done by the Council of State, elected officials, and the controller. And now it's got a provision for the executive director of the State Board of Elections. I mean, it's such an anomaly.
Why would they do that, though?
Well, what's hard to grasp is to have been casted as a partisan at times, not recognizing that my background is public administration. Now you're inserting one of those positions is an HR director, legislative affairs. These are positions that I went through a time period where they actually cut positions from the agency, and now we're going to add positions, and they're going to be possibly, they're going to be politically appointed position. Why does an HR director need to be politically appointed? And it's difficult to understand, and it really, it's challenging to me because I know what my compass and the compass of the county directors and the compass of those civil servants, and that is to ensure that every eligible voter can cast their ballot. What does a politically appointed position look like? And
it looks like they're trying to steal the elections and tilt them in their favors.
Well, there's a lot of laws that will have to be changed to do that. And I hope that that's not the motivation. But I think, you can't take away all the institutional knowledge and insert politics, because this is not politics. And I think that's what we have to be very mindful of. And in the omnibus bill, there's some additional positions. And, let's just keep in mind that when I left the agency, there were basically 60 employees. And now you've got 7 appointed in the mini budget and 5 potentially if the omnibus bill goes into effect. It's not been voted on yet. It's only in committee. But, that's a huge chunk of people in an agency that also oversees campaign finance, that also has in-house development staff, so computer programmers and database administrators and so forth. So I don't think that there's a reason why your senior software developer would need to be of a certain political persuasion or someone that gets bounced around with each new executive director.
I mean, I agree with you, but there's clearly a reason why they're trying to do this.
Well, I think there's no good faith reason. Right. I mean, I think there
in
are
my
reasons.
opinion, yes, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, the optics are not great.
Well, even if they do not take all these steps, the majority of the board has a lot of influence on things like early voting sites and whether there's Sunday voting.
Yeah.
And so, that is why, Governor Cooper, Governor Stein, even Governor McCrory, because when one of those attempts to change up the makeup of the State Board of Elections was to take that authority away from Governor McCrory by the legislature of his own party. And so that's, it really just becomes, if you don't even get into some of these other changes that have happened, there is a control factor of, do you allow for Sunday voting? What's the makeup of the poll workers at the voting sites? What are the rules around voter ID? The prior board in my administration allowed for the digital ID at UNC Chapel Hill. This board has had to come in, deal with a lawsuit, and they've chose to do away with that as an option. So, those are the kind of things partisan. That, these are very nuanced, but it does build a case. And so we do all need to be very mindful to make sure that our voter registration is up to date and correct, know where your polling place is, know when the voting hours are, bring proper form of ID, and make sure that you know what's acceptable, for that election.
Can I register Daniel to vote? Am I allowed to do that?
That would not be allowed.
Can I give him a sheet to register?
That used to be allowed.
Yeah, I thought you meant like register, like you sign for him.
No. But you're talking about because.
Can you help him register to vote? Yes, you can help him. There was a bill at one point that was going to do away with groups being able to do voter registration drives and so forth, but the ability to assist him, as long as you don't make selections for him like his party affiliation.
Okay.
That's you're fine.
You can give me the form.
You can
and
give
tell
me-
me.
you can give him the
and-
form.
and tell me which ones I need to sign and which where I don't need to write what I do need to write.
Yeah,
That's
you can
fine.
help him look up to see if he is registered and if it's an update and that kind of thing. But you know, really, like we between DMV and we also did a partnership with DMV where any DMV customer, they don't have to do a DMV service; they can register to vote or up their registration.
Super convenient.
That was something else we put in place. I mean, there's just innovation was really key, especially during COVID, and so I try to focus
Innovation
on.
is woke, Karen.
I don't think so. Innovation is the job of public administration, I think. How do you best serve the citizens?
Yes.
Put that on a bumper sticker. Karen, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us and sharing your wealth of institutional knowledge and your story. I think this is something that every North Carolinian, regardless of whether they just got here or they lived here their whole life, or they vote or they don't vote, which if you don't vote, you should. I think this is something we all need to hear.
Absolutely.
And you're an excellent messenger for it. I think that it was great to get into the weeds on a lot of this because I agree with you that I think, the best way to resolve a crisis of trust is communication and transparency, and just I'm going to talk at you till all your questions are answered and we'll both go home better for it. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think is that about it, Quinn? Do you have anything else we want to say?
What's next for you?
Well, I am still in elections administration. I just am doing it from a consulting role. I'm doing work for the MIT Election Data and Science Lab. That sounds even wonkier
fancy.
than our whole conversation's already been. For the National Election Center, which has the certification program for election officials and helping other states and North Carolina with their professional associations. I'm also doing some work in emergency management partnerships and cybersecurity partnerships, because a lot of those support networks are not there for election officials any longer. So
You are still in the game.
I am very much in the game. I said that in my closing remarks. This is my passion. This is my profession, and I'm committed to ensuring that every eligible voter can cast their ballot.
And we need more people like you.
I'm surrounded by some wonderful people across the aisles, across the states, and it is truly an elections family. I will say that. Anyway, we could go on and on and on about that too. I hope we haven't bored everybody with my wonkiness.
Oh no, I think it's good. But make
thank
sure
you.
people check you out and learn more about what you're doing. And can people find you anywhere? And are you putting stuff out there for people to learn from?
Mostly, I stick to LinkedIn. I found that
Oh, you're one of them.
social media was
You
a
and Jeff Jackson.
Well, social media was a difficult space over the last
I
6
can
years
imagine.
for election officials. So, we kind of kept it to the agency, and personally, I've kept it pretty much to LinkedIn.
That's why you're
but-
still sane. That's what it is.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
I don't
measured
know.
use of social media.
I'm glad you think I'm still sane.
follow us
Probably
on
working
social
in this
media.
profession should have my head checked, but
For sure. Definitely follow the Hometown Holler wherever you get your social media, Facebook, Twitter, Spacebook, MyFace, all of the above.
I think that's it.
That's
man.
it. Let's get out of
All
here.
right, cheers.
Yep.